Hello friends, and welcome back to our Fast API tutorial. This is going to be attempt number 2 at video 27, which is security with OAuth 2, password bearer, and JavaScript, or JSON web tokens, not JavaScript, JSON web tokens. Okay, let's get into it. So we've got our app up and running here. I go ahead and refresh the page. I hope this is visible. This is not 3,000. This should be 8,000. There we go. So I hope this is all a little visible. I'm on a new OS. It's not. It's not Windows, so I don't know how to zoom the entire thing. So I just thought I would make the zoom a little bit bigger. So we'll just have to work with what we've got. Okay. So the first thing that we're going to do, we're going to examine what a JSON web token is. So we go to JWT.io and we can see a JSON web token is a stateless means of authentication. So it's comprised of 3 parts. Here we have the algorithm and token type. This section is encoded with the data that we want to include, and this section is the signature. Okay, now if I just start typing in here, hello world, you notice that this was all changing as I was typing. Let's zoom in just a little bit more. Hello YouTube. So you can see it's changing there. Now, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be, instead of using the token that was just, it was just created with the username. I forget exactly where it was. Get user, fake decode token, return user, get current user. Yeah, the access token was just set to be user.username. So instead of doing that, we're going to actually use something that we're going to have to decode. Okay, so first thing we need to do is install a couple of packages, and I'm just going to go ahead and just add them to the requirements, because then PyCharm will automatically install them. Well, not automatically, but whatever. We're going to add Python Jose cryptography. And we're also going to add in passlib bcrypt. And we're not going to worry too much about what these are just yet. Okay, why isn't it installing? There we go, install requirement. Okay, now, first thing we need to do, and I've actually already done it, so it's I've already imported these up here because, like I said, this is now the second time I'm trying to do this. So from passlib.context, we're going to import crypt context, and then from Jose we're going to import JWT and JWT error. Okay, now what we are going to do here first is we're going to set up the hashing algorithm that we're going to be using, or some of the parameters. So we're going to set a secret key equals, and the idea behind this is just is supposed to be a long string, and it's not just any long string. You're supposed to use OpenSSL and everything like that. I don't feel like doing that right now, so I'm just going to do the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. Okay, and we will set the algorithm to be HS256, and we're going to set access token expire minutes equal 30. Okay, this is kind of just the beginning sort of stuff. Don't worry too much about what any of this is just yet. You'll see where we're going to use it in a little while. Now let's set up our fake users DB, which is going to be, I'm going to use the dict stuff because that's easier. John Doe equals dict, username equals John Doe, full name equals John Doe, email equals johndoe@example.com, hashed password, we're going to leave this blank for now, and disabled equals false. Now the hashed password before, what we were doing is where is it? We would just add fake hashed onto the beginning of it, which is not obviously not a good hashing algorithm, if you can even call it an algorithm. So we're going to actually use a hashing algorithm, and I'm going to generate the hash password in just a little bit. So let's just move on really quickly. So now let's create a token class, which inherits from base model. And we'll just say access token is going to be a string, and token type is going to be a string. So this is the same sort of thing that we were just doing up here. This is needed for the OAuth 2 password bearer, the scheme that we're going to be using. Class token data is going to inherit from base model as well. That is just going to have username, which is string, or none equals none. So this is information that we're going to be storing in the token. So you can see here, there's some typical stuff. There's the name, the issued at, there's the sub. This is where we're going to end up passing in the username, but you'll see that in just a little bit. Now we're going to add a user class, which inherits from base model. Username is a string. Email is a string, or none equals none. Full name is a string, or none equals none. And disabled is a bool, which equals false by default. Okay, and now we want to add one more model, user in DB, which inherits from user. So any user in DB object will have these 4 fields, as well as hashed password, which is a string. Okay, now we need to set up a password context, and what this is going to do is this is going to give us functionality where we can hash passwords, we can verify passwords, things like that. So let's set this up. Equals crypt context. Now there are a couple of things that we need to include. Schemes is going to Schemes is going to be bcrypt, which is why we installed. Nope, not that. Which is why we installed passlib with bcrypt. And we're going to say deprecated equals auto. So if we just look really quickly, passlib context, it's not the first time I've been looking this up. So you can look at all the stuff that's in here. If we look schemes, list of algorithms the instance should support. So we're using bcrypt. You can use some other schemes as well. And deprecated equal list of algorithms which should be considered deprecated. And you can see a little bit down here about what using auto does. I'm not really going to touch on it too much. Let's just set it like this for our very basic context here. Now, OAuth 2 scheme equals OAuth 2 not password request form. It's going to be password bearer token URL equals token. Now, just in case you don't remember from the last video, what this is going to do is this is going to give us login functionality somewhere on here. And we're going to be able to click a little authorize button in the top right that when we go to authorize, it will call this token URL. So we're going to have to set this up eventually, just like we did in the last one, but we'll get there. Next, we want to set up some helper functions. So def verify password. What this will do, this is going to take in a plain password that we're going to use to log in. Plain password. And it's going to compare it against the hashed password that's in the fake user's database. And we're just going to return password context dot verify plain password hashed password. Okay, so the beauty of this, so we're not going to be storing plain text passwords in the database. That's not a good thing to do. You want to store hashed passwords, but then you wonder, how do I check to make sure that a password is valid? you do something like this. You're going to pass in the plain password, which will use the algorithms that you've set and the parameters that you've set, and it will hash it, and then it will check to see that they're equal. Okay. Next, we're going to set get password hash from a password, and we're just going to return password context dot hash password. Okay. Again, these are helper methods. Don't worry too much about where we're going to be using them. I'll point it out as we go. Next, we need to define a get user method. Username is a string, and we're passing in a database. If username in DB, userdict equals DB username, and then we're going to return user in DB userdict. So all this is doing is we're passing in a value with our database. So we would pass in John Doe with our fake users database. And if that user is in the database, we're going to create a user in DB object where we'll get these 4 fields plus the hashed password. Now we want to create a method called authenticate user. We're going to pass in a database. Username is going to be a string. Password is going to be a string. And now we're going to get our user. User equals get user, fake DB, and username. Now, if we don't get anything back from this method, then we don't want to authenticate the user. So if not user, return false. Next, if the user exists, we want to check the password. But if the password doesn't match, then we want to return false. We don't want to authenticate if the password doesn't match. So if not verify password, so this is going to be password and then user dot hashed password. Then return false. Otherwise, we're going to return the user. Okay, that's hopefully fairly straightforward. Okay, now let's set up our token route. Yeah, let's create our route that will return our token. App.post token response model equals token. Async def login for access token. It will take in form data, which is going to be OAuth to password request form. Now, what we want to do, we want to say user equals authenticate user, fake users DB, form data dot username, and form data dot password. So we want to try and authenticate the user first. Now, if we don't have a user, or if we get false from authenticate user, we're going to raise an HTTP exception. Status code equals status.http 401 unauthorized. Detail equals incorrect username or password. And then headers equals www authenticate bearer. Okay. So if we get false from authenticate user, then we raise an exception. Otherwise, access token expires equals time delta minutes equals access token expire minutes. So what we're going to do, we're going to create a token that will expire after a certain period of time. The way access tokens work with JSON web tokens is typically you're going to have an access token that's passed in as a header. It's a bearer token that is then verified by any protected routes that you have. You would also usually get a refresh token so that once your access token expires, you then submit a post request with that refresh token and you get a new access token. And sometimes you'll rotate the refresh token and stuff like that. But that's generally how you want to do it. We're not going to be creating refresh tokens in this video because that would be exceedingly long. So let's just worry about creating an access token. So we're going to say access token equals create access token. And we don't have that method yet. We're going to create it in a minute. And we're going to pass in data is going to equal sub user.username and token type bearer. Oh no, we don't want that. That's going to be, hold on a second. We're going to return access token is going to be access token. And here we're going to have token type as bearer. I read the wrong line. Sorry about that. For here though, we're going to do, what are we going to do? Expires delta equals access token expires. And I want this to be like that. Nope, I want it to be like that. And I'm going to close off this dictionary here. There we go. That looks a little bit better. So, get rid of this. So we're going to need to create this method here. So the idea is that we are going to we're going to pass in this information to our method that will return a JSON web token that we will then be able to kind of pass back and forth. Okay? So let's go ahead and create that method. Def create access token. Data will be a dictionary. Expires delta will be a time delta, or none equals none. Now, to encode equals data.copy. So we're going to be encoding this information in the JSON web token payload that we have right there, the data that's right there. So if expires delta, so if we've passed that in, then expire equals datetime.utcnow plus expires delta. Else expire is going to be datetime.utcnow plus time delta minutes equals 15. We're just going to set 15 minutes to be the default. Okay. Now we're going to want to pass in the expiration to our data that we're going to be encoding here. So we're going to say to encode.update expiration is expire. So great, we have this. This is just a generic dictionary though. Like we just have this dictionary that has the data that we're going to be encoding. How do we encode it? Well, I'll do it in 2 lines. Encoded JWT equals JWT.encode. So this comes from the Python Jose package. So we're going to be encoding our dictionary there. We need to pass in a secret key, and we need to tell it the algorithm is going to be the algorithm that we've set up top. So here is the secret key, and here is the algorithm. Let's just take a look right here really quickly. So you can see claims, key, algorithm, and then there's some extra information here. So that's what we're doing. Okay, so we have our encoded token, return encoded JWT. Good. So now we have an access token. Great. Grand. Now what we need to do, we can go back into here. We can refresh our page. Let's try this, try it out. John Doe. Password. Execute. It did not work. So this is a different error than I was anticipating. Oh no, it's the correct one. Okay, that's fine. We don't have a password set up for John Doe. So what we need to do is we're going to create a password context. We're going to open up our Python console and let us import crypt context from passlib.context, import crypt context. Then we are going to create a password context, and then we will just look at pwd context.hash. Let's call it password 1234. And there we go. We now have a hashed password that we can take this, put it there. Let's make sure it has rerun. Go to the very bottom. And it's showing incorrect username or password. And that's because we're setting password instead of 1234. Execute, and we have our token. Now, I'm just going to show you, before we kind of go into it any more depth here, because like this works and this is good, but we want to see how we can protect the route. We're going to need to decode the token. But let's go into here. And you notice, right here it's now showing invalid signature. I've copied in the token that we got from here. I've passed it in, and look, it shows me John Doe. It shows me when it expires at 5:43 Eastern Time on May 24th, which is today. So this kind of highlights something that's very important that you know, a lot of people talk about, but I'll just reiterate. Don't pass sensitive data in the payload, because this can be decoded. Like this, there's nothing secret about this. You know, you can decode this with the right algorithm. I mean, most of the time you're going to be using this, I would imagine. I don't know, to be honest with you. But this is decoded. You just get an invalid signature here. So if you try and pass this token to the backend with this as your secret key, it will not work. But you're still going to be able to see the data. So now if we instead though do the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. Now if we paste our token, you can see we get signature verified, because now the secret key matches what we've set here. Okay? So that's an important thing to remember. Don't pass sensitive data in your payload. Okay. Now let's create a couple of routes to actually, you know, get user information. So we're going to do app.get users me, response model equals user, async def get me, current user equals depends on get current active user, return current user. And we're also going to add in app.get users me items, async def read own items. I'm just going to copy this because it's the same thing. Return item ID is going to be foo. Owner is going to be current user dot username. Okay, now we're going to come up here, refresh, and it's not going to work because we've not set this. I was hoping it would work and we would be able to just kind of try and authenticate really quickly, but it doesn't work, which is fine. Let's create the method. So first thing that we're going to do, we're going to create we're going to create async def get current user, which will take in a token as a string, which depends on the OAuth2 scheme pass. And then we're going to say async def get current active user, which will return a current user, which is a user which depends on get current user. There. So now it's not breaking at the very least. Okay. So now let's implement this. So this is going to be the simpler one. So if current user dot disabled raise an HTTP exception, status code equals 400, detail equals inactive user. Otherwise, just return the current user. Simple. This is where it's going to get a little complicated. What we're going to need to do is take in the token that's passed in via the OAuth2 scheme. We're going to first try and decode the token. Then we're going to try and get the username from the token. Then we're going to try and get the user from the token. So decode, get the username, check to see if the user is in the database, effectively is what we're going to be doing. So first we're going to have a couple of unauthorized exceptions that can get thrown. So let's first just create the exception. Credentials exception equals HTTP exception. Status code equals status.http 401 unauthorized. Detail equals could not validate credentials. Headers equals authenticate bearer. Now, we're going to do a try and accept. JWT error, raise credentials exception. So this is baked in. So first thing we're going to try and do is decode the token. And if you can't decode it using here payload JWT dot decode token secret key algorithms equals algorithm. So if for some reason you pass in an invalid token where in here it said invalid signature, so let's get rid of this. Oh, it went away. Damn it. Okay, whatever. Where it said invalid signature before. If you try and pass in the invalid token, then it will throw an error. So we want to catch it and then raise the credentials exception. Otherwise, username, which is a string, is just going to be payload dot get sub. So if you recall, when we were creating the token, where is it? Create access token, we're setting the sub equal to the user.username. Okay. So now let's grab the username off of that token. So if we don't have a username, if username is none, then raise the credentials exception. Simple. If for some reason it's not been included, then we're good. We don't want to handle that. Otherwise, we're going to set token data equals token data with username equals username. Okay, now we're done with this part. Now what we want to do is we want to get the user. So we first gotten the username. So we have user equals get user, fake users DB, username equals token data dot username. Now, this is superfluous here. Like we could just be passing in the username here, but this is good for if you want to have extra data in your token data that you're going to be using later. This is just kind of setting it up. Okay. You might be wondering why not just pass in the username instead of setting token data. That's why we're doing that. So we're going to get the user from the username. If user is none, raise credentials exception. Otherwise, return user. Now this should all work. Let's go back into here. Let's close this because we don't need this. We're going to authorize up here. John Doe. Let's try password. And let's just open this up very quickly. Network. And let's try and authorize. This returns preview incorrect username or password. So what has happened? We've sent in the wrong password. So we're trying to authenticate, which is calling login. Or it's calling token. Sorry, it's calling token. First thing it tries to do is authenticate user. Get user. Well, John Doe should work. Let's get rid of the E and see if, and we're going to get the same error. Incorrect username or password. But if we pass in John Doe with an E, it goes into here, we get the user. If not verified password, return false. Password is no good because it was the hashed password 1234. Okay? So now let's do 1234. Now we have our token. You can see here is our token. Okay, I'm going to close this. So now what has happened? Let's close this a little bit. There we go. So we've gone to log in. We authenticate the user. We've gotten to the point where we get the user. It's passed all those checks. We're going to set the token to expire in 30 minutes. Then we're going to create an access token, which itself encodes it, which is why we got that encoded access token from before. Okay? Now we go into here. We can just hit, let's just hit try it out. Execute. And you can see we got the information, John Doe, example, John Doe and false. I'm not going to try and mess with the headers that are being sent. You can do that if you want to use Postman or something like that. You can change the token, and then you would see that it would try and fetch this, and it just wouldn't work. You can put the token in here. You can kind of play with some of the data that's in here, and you can see how it would not work, and you can kind of follow it through. But yeah, that's kind of it for this video. This was a bit of a long one of the longer ones that I've done. Again, let's just run black on this really quickly. So again, we authenticate first, which calls on token, which gets the user, gets an expiration, sets data to pass in for the token, and an expiration, and then we return said token. Then, when we go to fetch this information, or we can just fetch this as well just to show you. See, we get these items here. It first tries to get the current active user, which in and of itself calls get user, or get current user. So first we try and decode, then we grab the sub, which should be our username. Then we try and get the user using that username. If all of that works, then we get our user and we can get the information that we need. Okay, so again, a bit of complex sort of stuff, but it's when you kind of follow the code through, it makes a little bit of sense. In the next video, we're going to kind of step away from this deep sort of stuff. We're going to handle, I think, middleware and cross-origin resource sharing. I might need to set up a quick little front-end app just to kind of play with it. So you can kind of see how cores would work and not work. But yeah, that will be in the next video. I will see you then.